I'm Peter Dumovic. I'm part of the Friends of Pitney Farm group. Thank you for coming tonight. If you're here to hear about Pitney Farm, you're right. We gave a similar presentation a couple of weeks ago, and we thought we would do this a second time to capture some more people who couldn't attend the first meeting. And we're also filming this meeting, so for those people who are not able to come tonight, they can view this on video on demand through Mendham TV. And thanks for Mendham TV for doing that for us. We're here to talk about a new proposal, a new conceptual proposal for the Pitney Farm property. We call it the Pitney Farm Park and Homestead. What happens tonight is a couple of people will present this concept to you. Our president, Mrs. Ami Ryan, and our board secretary, Mark Perrett. And then, most importantly, we'll leave plenty of time for any questions that you guys have. And hopefully we'll provide some good answers to your questions. And then, as important, we'd like to have your input and suggestions based on this proposal for the Pitney Farm Park and Homestead. I'll keep time here, so while we started a couple of minutes late, I'll have you out of here by 8 p.m. sharp. So with that, let me introduce Ami Ryan.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming tonight. I am Ami Ryan, and I am the president of the Friends of Pitney Farm Incorporated. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit corporation. And tonight, as a continuation of our efforts, we are happy to present our proposal for the Pitney Farm Park and Homestead. We have an approximately 20-minute presentation tonight. We're going to cover details of our conceptual proposal and discuss its benefits. And then we would like to use the remainder of the evening to answer questions and gather input from all of you and your suggestions. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the trustees who are here tonight. You've already met Peter Dumovic, Mark Perrett, Sue Browse, Rick Blood, are some of our trustees. And the Friends of Pitney Farm has been working since 2015 to fulfill our mission, and we're dedicated to the historic preservation of Pitney Farm and the use of the property for the benefit of the community. I thought it'd be useful to provide some context for tonight's meeting and just do a little brief bit of history. In December of 2015, the Friends of Pitney Farm presented a detailed business plan for managing and repurposing the Pitney Farm property, all 12 of its acres. Then, in the end of February 2016, fire devastated the main house, and since then, we have been exploring means to fulfill our mission and assessing the feasibility of the options presented to us given the significantly altered conditions of the site. Now we have this conceptual proposal for the Pitney Farm Park and Homestead. We believe that this proposal balances the concerns of the neighboring residents as well as optimizes the investment made in the 7 acres of open space by Mendham Township and by Morris County. Now I'd like to introduce Mark Perrett, who will be moderating tonight's presentation.
Good evening, everyone. As Ami said, my name is Mark Perrett. I'm the secretary for the Friends of Pitney Farm. In addition, I'm also a principal in the firm Perrett, Soms & Architects, architectural firm that's been in Morris County for almost 30 years now. I'm a licensed architect and also a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey. So the Pitney Farm Park and Homestead concept, and again, I want to stress that this is a concept. We're very early in the process of considering what to do with the property at this time. We've had a lot of discussion internally. We've gone to some people externally to get some ideas. All this has been generated by the fire and the subsequent transition at the property and the apparent interest in the municipality as well. So with that in mind, we work to create and maintain a park on the 7 acres that are restricted as open space. And we're also looking to rehabilitate and restore the oldest surviving section of the farmhouse, which is the piece that has remained from the fire. And we hope to do that on approximately 1 acre of the remaining piece as a set aside from the balance of the property. So I think it's more easily explained with an aerial view of the property. We have the designated open space, which you can see against Shelton Road, and then wraps alongside Cold Hill, fronting the property, and then towards the bottom of the map that's here, which is buffered by residential single-family homes. In addition, there is a piece that is not part of the designated open space, which includes what we're showing as the Homestead area at just about an acre and a quarter. And then the green shaded area on the map is what we're understanding is to be set aside for residential use at the discretion of the Mendham Township Committee. And there is no formal plan that we're aware of at this point of how that's actually to be developed. But that's our understanding at this point. So we have here a rendering of the proposal for the repair of the house that remains and is fire damaged. And then in addition, you can see what we would hope to be a development of garden spaces, cleaning up the property, the lawns, and in addition, you see a small patio area. The patio area represents an approximation of the footprint of the balance of the building that was destroyed by fire. So in this iteration, the expectation would be that we might try to memorialize the house as it originally stood by some hardscape. I guess to get a little further along in explanation, this shows a floor plan of the remaining house, and then the grayed area shows future patio and garden, which again is a reflection of the house as the original footprint that was destroyed by fire in February of 2016. So you can see what remains is not very large. I think it's less than 2,000 feet on the first floor. It's broken up into smaller spaces, which is what which would be customary to a house of that size. This is a pre-1800s homestead originally, so it's a series of smaller spaces within the context of the remaining structure. So what we're looking for, again, to sort of summarize, is to protect and promote the public investment in the designated open space, to provide limited community meeting space within the original homestead, and with doing all that to help preserve a piece of Mendham's history. So again, now that we get to I think it's easiest to work from the aerial because I think it shows the property in a relatively reasonable way that can be understood. And I think at this point, we wanted to open it up to the public for questions about our plan.
Linda Fairchild, 7 Cherry Lane. I applaud you for your passion that you have to preserve Pitney. I'm interested in knowing how much you've raised and what your goal is for what amount do you want to raise for this project.
I'll field that one, Linda. We anticipate that to do basically what we've said here, which is to repair the home from the fire damage and put it into a usable state. And in addition, building a buffer zone on along the open space, which was very important to a lot of the neighbors that we've gotten feedback from. Doing that with some other site planning and whatnot, we anticipate that we're probably going to need about $600,000 to take care of all that. At this point, we have done no fundraising at all. We have not gone out, we haven't sought anything because we have no firm commitment from the Mendham Township Committee as to if we can move forward on this. But in just of our conversations that we've had with people, right now we have about $100,000 in verbal commitments.
And do you have a timeline for this project? For the raising of the money?
We would like to start tomorrow. It's all in the hands of the Mendham Township Committee. We're unfortunately, we have to wait until they make for their final decisions on what we can do.
Now, in your plan, it shows what remains of the house, which obviously was in poor shape, and I guess it's gotten a little more degraded, even though I'm sure you tried to put some tarps up. That's been totally effective. You show a floor plan of the first floor, and perhaps in your more extensive plan, you have a utilization plan for the second floor as well? What would that be?
I think at this point, the expectation is the second floor, because it's even smaller than the first floor, and because we don't really have programmed space for that, the expectation is it would essentially be mothballed at this point.
So that wouldn't be utilized this time. And you're saying the first floor would be for meetings only?
I think that's really all we can imagine it would be used for, small meetings.
I mean, I heard other like museums and all kinds of things.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's true. We do expect to set aside, I think, the 2 front rooms for museum and display space.
Okay, I'm not trying, I just
No,
thought
no,
that's what I heard.
that's an excellent point.
You've indicated you'd like to do something about the vegetable garden, the cutting garden, the maple lily, et cetera, the wall garden. Those all exist in open space.
That's correct.
And your group's been involved for many years. Nothing has precluded your committee from doing something there without all the rest of this. And my question to you is, if those are your intentions, why have you waited? Because the vegetable garden could have been started at any time.
Mhm.
Committee never, I'm sure, would have stopped that. It wouldn't stop it today. The maple lily, now, I don't know if you had an arborist look at those. Have you? Because I believe the township committee did, and those trees are at the end of their lives. As I
Mhm.
understand it,
They're ancient trees.
they're about ready to be chopped
They're
down.
ancient trees.
So I don't really know that I mean, it's a nice idea, but I don't know if it's a practical matter, based on their age, you could save those. But certainly, having a community garden, that could be started at any time. There's nothing precluding you from doing that. You don't need the homestead to do that. I think it would be fabulous. I wanted the committee to do some things on their own. I think a walking path would be great. There's all kinds of things that could be done.
Correct.
We seem to be stuck in mud, so to speak, from accomplishing anything as different objectives are sought.
Mhm.
So my recommendation to you is that why not move forward with the things you can do now, and that might incent the committee, and certainly would demonstrate more your intentions than waiting for everything, just do anything at all. I believe access is an issue that I think is still up for grabs. I'm not entirely sure what the county's going to do, but that's an issue you need to look at. I don't see it on your plan, and I'm not entirely sure which direction you're thinking of going in. But access off Dakota Road theoretically could be a problem, even though maybe it shouldn't be, but that is potentially a problem.
We have started discussion, actually, the Township Committee has started a discussion with the county on the access issues of the open space. And we are setting up a meeting to meet with the state open space because the county deferred to the state on this matter. So we're about to go
a
down.
lot more complex.
Well, and I think that some of what, again, we've been waiting for a go-ahead from the Township Committee in that, and the access is very important. So there is a meeting scheduled in the later part of June with the state, and I think that will give some insight to the township as to what can be done, and it also ultimately to this group.
Another issue I don't see that you're addressing, although you did in your first plan, is parking.
Correct.
As you know, the original parking plan is obviously a much more aggressive plan. The county wasn't too thrilled with them because it was intruding on open space, and they weren't enthusiastic about that. So I don't know, I mean, obviously, if you get an town, theoretically you could do it, but where would you be putting parking? How many spots would you be putting in based on your current plan?
I think in our, as we were going through the concept, we were talking about, first of all, doing as little parking as we needed to, and then also in respect for the structures that are in place and the development of the farm as it presently stands, we'd like to avoid paved areas, we'd like to avoid hard surfaces and curbing and things like that, but that's going to all have to be negotiated through the town and the county. That being said, I think the number we were talking about was something between 10 and 20 parking spaces.
And that you feel would accommodate your current plan, which is the museum in the front and then maybe the same space or other space for meeting?
I think that's correct. And in addition, we were also talking about parking for people who may be coming from other parts of the community just to be in the open space and not using the homestead at all.
Sure. Thank you.
And one of the things, just to address an earlier point, is the group has been focused on the entire homestead. That's why the attention to the gardens has been delayed. All of us here have worked towards the entire homestead, and without the ability of getting a signed lease with the township, we haven't been able to fundraise, and we're not in a position where we have funds to start the vegetable garden. We need to come to an agreement with the township on the open space, which is part of our negotiation, in exchange for using the homestead and preserving it. We would assume the maintenance of the open space and relieve that liability and maintenance costs from the township. So we see that as a plus for the taxpayers.
The raised gardens were repaired by the Boy Scouts, so those raised gardens, while, the gardens themselves were not maintained, the spaces were available. Just requires somebody to go over and shovel and
Yep.
put the land in the ground. That's the permission of the town.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm Bob Ricker. I'm actually from the borough, so be kind. Well, I'm very interested in the property. And forgive me if I ask some very basic questions that have long since been answered. I'm actually curious to know if there is any interaction with anybody from the borough to assist and help with the project.
Actually, one of our trustees is David Zimmerman, and he was a long-term resident of the township and now resides in the borough, actually right across the street from that. We've had some interest from borough residents in the property. Since it is township-owned property and because there's been a lot of debate about what to do with it, we've focused most of our outreach to the township, but we certainly would like this to be something for all of Mendham.
Oh, then I share that thought. Granted that the property has been here long before there was a borough and a township.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think there is a compelling reason to get everybody involved. I'm kind of curious because Mendham Borough has but one small little Ralston General Store museum. There really isn't a museum that captures Mendham history, and so I applaud the idea that there might be at least a section or a bit of the property set aside for that. I think it could be pretty special. But nonetheless, other questions. One question came up, I think Sam mentioned access. Right now, the access off of Cold Hill Road, it doesn't have to be that way. If you have that residential area on the side, why not make a condition of developing that area to provide access to the property and solve it that way? Then you don't get the county involved like you think.
I can answer that.
Yes.
I think that there is a concern from the neighbors in that residential development that bringing additional traffic through their neighborhood would not be something that they would be really excited about.
All right.
And for the purposes of maximizing the use and I think the drive-by attractiveness of the site, it makes sense for it to be on Cold Hill because that's historically the front of the property and it's also the easiest to access and find.
I was thinking financially, you could get the paving, curbing, everything paid for if you put it as a condition to the development, that portion. The other questions that I have were, heard about Boy Scouts helping out. Has there been a thought about using volunteer labor for any part of it, kind of on the Habitat for Humanity type of?
We would welcome any and all volunteer
Oh, good.
and donated services to
Sure.
help us accomplish this
No, I
project.
think that
Would
you
be
might
wonderful.
find some support for that.
Yeah.
So that would
Yeah.
be, and then the dollar values drop and maybe the
Absolutely.
feasibility goes up. Okay. Well, I think generally those are my questions. I'm very curious to see how it all plays out.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just want to make one comment, Bob, that I'm not sure that it was clear in the answer. If the township sells off the area that's in that bluish green that says residential use at discretion of the township committee, if they sell it off to a private developer, the only access to that area will be in that little section there coming off of Ballantyne Road. So, but we don't kind of want to overlap with that, so we would prefer to have the access come in off of Cold Hill, because we think it's more public and if there's more cars going in and out, it'd be better to come off of Cold Hill.
I was thinking if there were county issues, county road issues or approval issues, you could put them off into that area, but I do think the residents might be an issue.
One of the things that I wanted to mention was that the footprint of what survived, the 2 rooms that we're talking about using for museum space are actually the oldest surviving portions of the house, which may date as early as 1722. And so in terms of creating a celebration of local history and Mendham history, something that, as you so well pointed out, predates Mendham Township, Mendham Borough, and all of that seems like a great location to start that.
Hi, I'm Taylor Bonacor. I was born and raised in Mendham, and now I'm back to raise my family here. I find this really interesting and compelling for a couple different reasons. One is that I'm realizing now back here with a 1-year-old, it's actually kind of tough to find public community spaces in Mendham, which I think as we think about the population of town, and in order to survive, there needs to be an inflow of a younger generation. I think that's a huge kind of missing component of town that is really attractive to people who are starting families. So that's why I'm here, to learn about that. I was curious on that point, the types of community activities that you all envision happening here, because I would imagine that in order to activate a groundswell of support, those kinds of details would be really interesting to people. And maybe if I can just throw in an extra question, because I do think these 2 things are linked. Beginning to understand how things work with the township committee and kind of the governance side of town, I'm curious really specifically what Friends of Pitney Farm needs from the community in order to actually achieve this objective. What does this decision process look like with the township committee? And if you can clarify the roles a little bit too, because I understand 501c3, but sort of the decision-making power and how this works and how the community's involved, all that would be interesting.
Okay.
Ami, you want to tackle that one? There's a bunch of questions.
Okay. Gosh. I'll start with activities. We see the sort of natural connection with both history and the Historic Society and that, but also with recreation. This is designated open space. We view this as parkland and for passive recreation. And so we see the opportunity, particularly in having the house as the center of that kind of backwards J-shaped piece of public parkland as the sort of hub of that, and the opportunity for both limited small indoor and outdoor activities. We have had some suggestions about things that could go on in the parkland, and those have included community gardens, which there has been interest in doing, and there's a lot of history about what, where, and when, and we don't need to delve into that too much tonight. But there is certainly a wonderful opportunity on this property to facilitate that, including the presence of a greenhouse and tool sheds. There's also been the suggestion, and which is something Sam mentioned before, of creating a walking path, someplace for those people who want to do a circuit for recreation that doesn't exist now. If there's enough support and the patio goes in, then there's an opportunity to have lawn areas and hardscape and all sorts of interesting things could go on. I know at one point somebody suggested, wouldn't it be interesting to do a kids program all about the secret garden, because there's a walled garden on the property, and so it runs the gamut. But I would also say that really one of our big purposes, we want to hear from you. We know the property well, and we've looked at it. What are the kinds of uses that you would like to see facilitated in town? What are the opportunities you see here? And then we'll go back to the drawing board and see how we incorporate all of that. Certainly in the footprint of the existing house, there's enough room to take what was used as the dining room when the Pitneys were in residence, and a smaller room which we've referred to as a Watkins room, but if those of you who know the history of the house, there was an etched window pane that was etched by a daughter of the Pitney family when her son died during the Civil War. And so those two rooms could be focused on museum things. We know anecdotally that there are things in town in storage in various places that are not available for the public, and so we see the opportunity there. And then to have some indoor space to do very limited sorts of things. The rooms are not big. You know, the dining room seats, I don't know, 16 tops, and that's the largest room on the first floor. So this is not massive amounts of space. This is small space, but it could be focused.
You know, small scout meetings, you know, a Boy Scout, a little Cub Scout den with 8 kids might be able to have a meeting there, Girl Scout meeting, you know, that.
I'm curious too about like really innovative ways to build community. Like if you think about how to foster connections that don't exist within a community, if there's an opportunity for this space to be the kind of place that like really pioneers new approaches in bringing different people together across community.
Do you have some suggestions that you could give us about the kinds of
I
things?
have a background in this, so
Okay.
I have lots of ideas, which I can share at a different
I
time. but
would
I would
love to
it.
hear
I
that.
think that could be an interesting thing
Okay.
to explore, especially the way that homesteads and farms and community gardens, I mean, this is a very fluid and like hot topic right now, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
that would be wonderful.
And then I'm also just curious, like points of view on whether or not this should happen aside, how does this occur? Like, how does this move forward?
So just to paraphrase, so you're asking me, how do we get from right here, maps and
Yeah,
nice
well, and
PowerPoint
references-
slides to
Right, to the
shovels in ground and,
Committee, so from a
Okay.
decision-making standpoint.
so without,
What's the flow?
all right, without getting too much into the nitty-gritty details of things, in 2009, the entire 12-acre site, so that's what you see up there, was purchased from Mrs. Pitney. And it was done with a combination of township funds and open space funds. As part of the donation of $1.5 million from Morris County, the 7 acres were designated in perpetuity as open space as a deed restriction. So there was a meets and bounds overlay placed over that line, which includes everything but the homestead area, and that blued out area is that 7 acres. And that is ours forever, Mendham Township. It is ours. The remaining 5 acres was left outside the designation with the intention of using it for some sort of municipal facility. And the kinds of municipal facilities from, I think, very early on, I understand, I was not involved in the project then, there were some conversations about town hall or moving facilities. We've explored lots of options through committees and that. But as it stands right now, the entire property is owned by Mendham Township. Mendham Township cannot sell or lease the designated open space. But if it subdivides the remaining 5 acres from that, it can sell or lease the remaining 5 acres. So that's where things stand. Because Morris County gave us the $1.5 million to help purchase the open space, they have some interest in the kinds of activities that get planned, and the deed restriction lists what things can and cannot happen there. In the intervening time between the purchase of the property and now, the property was placed on the state's Green Acre Fund's Rosie site, or Rossi, depending on who says it, which is the Register of Open, or the something Open Space Inventory, forgive me. So now the state has some say about what happens. The existing deed restrictions include things like access across it, access to private property. So right now, there are questions about how much access. There is provision to put parking. Parking is possible within the open space. As I understand it, that parking has to be justified, the number of parking spaces, by the amount of anticipated use in the open space. So at this point, Mendham Township is considering what to do with the property, and they're exploring options about how to utilize it. And it's an ongoing and open conversation among the residents, but the ultimate decision about whether to subdivide, whether to sell, rests with the Mendham Township Committee.
Forgive me, is the residential piece and what we're talking about tonight, are these inextricably linked, as in it must be decided in one?
As we stand right now, the property is one block and lot designation, one 12-acre site. So there are a host of public reviews that have to be done in order to create more than one lot, to subdivide that lot into multiple lots, which would then allow for things. But there's, because of the designated open space layer, everybody has to sort of, check all their boxes and make sure that we talk to all the approving entities to make sure that it gets done properly. So right now, the township, I believe, is doing their homework about what's possible from their end. We wanted to get out to the public with this idea. Hopefully, we're hoping that we get lots of support for it, but also input about the details about what this looks like, so that when we, go to the township, they want to know that the public is interested in this and behind this, and what your concerns are, what you like about it, what you don't like about it, what you wish was there that, perhaps we haven't seen, how we go about doing this. So that's where we are. The process will take some time. It depends upon how motivated everybody is to get moving. We would like some version of a commitment from the township that they're interested in our basically taking over management responsibilities for the designated open space, and then also some management, for that. And once we have that commitment, then we can get going with fundraising. As Sue said, we have some initial estimates about what that fundraising was like, but obviously fundraising of that scale, we need everybody's support, whether it's through volunteer efforts and donated services and lots of generous folks writing checks and coming and supporting this and doing that. So so that's it. Have I given
very
you?
clear.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Could you just clarify, because I know that, I don't think I have a question, but I know a lot of people that will. The portion of the site that can be developed at all is that one that's shaded, correct? None of the open space backwards J can ever be developed into anything
Right.
else. It's just open space.
Right, the deed restriction is overlaid on that backwards J shape. It's about approximately 7 acres of property, and it is in perpetuity designated as open space.
But let me clear, just to make sure everyone's very clear. Where we have on the map where it says Homestead area, that is also open for development. That's part of the 5 acres that the township owns.
Right.
So it is at risk of being sold by the township to a developer to build houses. We're coming to, we're hoping that we're working with the township to try to get a win-win solution where they can sell some of the acreage that they own to get some money into the town, which we know the town needs money, but keeping some of it that we can preserve the house. But that area is at risk.
So,
Any further sort of questions? And any question is fine.
Or suggestions, if anybody has
Because
any
because
other
the
ideas.
next piece is, I think, critical for us. You heard from both Mark and Ami. We've got 2 elements here. The homestead, which, as we just heard, is potentially in jeopardy. It could be sold. But we've also got the park. And so your ideas in terms of what you'd like to see in the public park, passive recreation, we want to hear from. If there's anything you'd like, anything you don't want especially, and in terms of the homestead, things that you'd like to see there as well. So in this session, Mark's going to sort of
I'm the
facilitate
scribe.
that.
Pass
But
that off.
that's the whole purpose of tonight as well, in terms of not just answering your questions, but seeking your input in terms of what you'd like to see.
So at the last meeting, people just sort of offered suggestions. So we certainly be open to that as well. Suggestions, and that includes things you'd like to see and things you'd rather not see. Yes?
I thought the walking path
Mm-hmm.
was a great idea because, as we all know, there are no sidewalks in Mendham, so walking along the street, especially the main street, is particularly hazardous. So it would be nice to have a place you could walk. I would like to see something, I'm not exactly sure what, but something for the a little older kids.
Mm-hmm.
There's virtually nothing for the older kids, the teenager kids, like a community center or someplace to go. I think people misunderstand that Brookside Community is really not a community center. It's more of a space to rent. But there's no place for the kids to go, to meet, to do homework together, to have a coffee. If you go to Chester in the afternoon, the Starbucks there is filled with kids from Mendham. Half the cars in the parking area are from Mendham. They're all teenagers. So it'd be nice to have something for them, someplace to go.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
On the Homestead, I mean, I said it, but I think a museum to capture artifacts of Mendham would be excellent, put them on display. And certainly there's a lot to delve into from the Pitney family alone. It might be just enough there.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the museum goes, is there any there must be a tie in a small community like this with the historical center, the historical society, and the general store, and the cider mill and so forth. Is there any crossover there?
I think at this point, we see potential for all of that, and we know that some members of the Historical Society have been interested, but it's all avenues to explore more. Somebody had mentioned gardening before.
Yeah, I liked it when the farmer's market was there.
Okay,
Just reiterate, because I was at the last meeting.
Yes.
The Recreation Commission perspective, of course, we want to have a place for classes and cooking classes and all these things that we dream about at our meetings. And, to your point, the community club isn't really a facility. We do programs here. In this room, you can do it. So, we would love to see it preserved and walking path, picnics, and
Right.
community events.
so you see the facility, the usefulness of having an indoor
Absolutely.
space as well as some outdoor space in terms of both lawn space, but also the patio space for
Oh,
some activities.
Yeah.
I think we are increasingly seeing the private sector fill a lot of the gaps that exist in Mendham. So for example, one of the local farms is now doing outdoor yoga out on the grounds, and they had a huge number of people there the first time that I went. To me, this is a big missed opportunity for recreation in Mendham. I mean, it's great that a private entity is filling this, and as a resident, I have access to this kind of thing. But I think that the idea of cooking classes and health and wellness activities, a lot of the programming that the library puts on, but doesn't attract people because of the space that it's in and the location that it's in town. To me, these are big kind of missed opportunities for the town that this can capitalize on. There's a huge list of programming things. To me, I'm not thinking so much about like physical spaces as the stuff that could be happening there. And all you need to have that stuff happen is an outdoor space or an indoor space that has parking.
Okay, that's great.
Just to piggyback on both your comments, just to give you an idea of how tough space is to find here. The way I look at it, we have plenty of outdoor space. It's not being utilized to the benefit of the community as much as it could be. My daughter takes oboe lessons, and her teacher comes to Mendham once a week and teaches probably 5 or 6 students from the Mendham area for the middle school and the high school. could not find a space to lease just for those few hours on a Thursday afternoon. She actually does her lessons at my house. Her group of kids come through every Thursday because there's no space, which I find amazing. And she was willing to pay for it, there's just not space.
Yeah. I'd love to see dinners, community dinners, maybe tied to this new idea of farm to table, facilitated conversation that brings together interesting folks from the community to get together and, meet each other and talk and share a meal, and there could be kids involved in that kind of thing, preparing food and learning about how to converse on different topics. I think that space could be a really interesting place to bring intergenerational people with diverse interests, like the best diversity that there is in Wyndham, get it all together in one room and have it be really, like, that's a new thing kind of in Morris County that Wyndham can really be around with a space like this.
Excuse me, anybody else? Any ideas? And it doesn't stop at 8 o'clock. Like, if you think of something, you can certainly
Right.
send us other ideas.
Any concerns, any reservations, anything you don't like?
What's the biggest objection so far that you're hearing?
The concern about the amount of activity adjacent to neighbors is a big concern. Costs are a big concern.
And traffic and noise.
Traffic and noise.
Lights at night, car lights, moving through the property in the evening
And-
would be a concern.
You know, much of those can be dealt with landscaping, buffering, site design issues.
Here's another idea that I'm just brainstorming, so I don't know even how I feel about this, but I work remotely, and so I'm constantly hunting out space in town, whether it's at Starbucks in Chester, or sometimes I'm on the, the ledge at Simple Coffee, working in my living room, at the library. I was there today. I'm all over the place, and I'm quiet. I just usually need, like, a space for me to sit with a computer. I would be willing to pay for that if it was down the street for certain times of day, to sit in like one room, maybe with other people that work remotely in town, almost like co-working, confined to a very small space. Again, I'm not sure if I want that in Mendham, but it's an idea.
Just to follow up on that, so I understand it. So you would need Wi-Fi access or something in that kind of facility? Okay.
Wi-Fi and like this much table space.
I have a question about the facility. There were sort of garages or little sheds that were adjacent to the building. Are they still there, and will they also be included with this?
Yeah, the garage wing still stands. And as far as we know, it was largely unaffected by the fire. But its fate is uncertain at this point. We don't know. We have not, it partly depends. I mean, I can see some utility to the space. It depends upon the feedback we get. It depends upon the decisions the township committee makes or doesn't make about what they want to see happen on the site.
But they are within that one.
Yes, they're roughly under the word homestead. They're still there, yeah. All of the structures still stand except for the portion that fell down. I'm sorry, Sam?
I just wanted to go over some of the negative problems of the site. Nothing to do with your group. The negative issues on the site are the way in which it was acquired. It's 12 acres. The township committee at that time, in its wisdom, thought they were acquiring usable space with access to Golden Road. But they buried the usable space in the back near the residential area. And some people wanted to preserve the walled garden also, which is great. But number one, they didn't subdivide when they acquired it, which made absolutely no sense when you think about it the first way. Number two, they didn't ensure they had stub access onto Golden Road. If they really wanted to use it for a business purpose, you know, not this business, but for Denver. They should have flipped the property. They should have dumped the open space more to the rear and had the usable space in the front. A lot of these issues wouldn't have necessarily been as big a deal, but just the way it was required. You know, a lot of times when you do something, you locally have a great idea, but there are details that have to be fleshed out. And it's readily apparent, despite the best intentions of the then committee, at least people I've talked to, that what they thought they were accomplishing, they weren't accomplishing at all. Because it's problematical to have a commercial or a business purpose or a municipal purpose which dumps into a residential area. And well, how they came to that decision, how they ended up in the result, that's the true problem. It's just reversed the way it should be if you really want to utilize it. Even for your type of purpose, it would be a lot easier if there was access control around.
Just to clarify the conditions of the open space, and I believe at the time that the Township Committee purchased the property, as I believe today, is one of the stipulations on the open spaces, you could traverse the open space as long as the property behind it was used for a public purpose. And at the time the township purchased the property, they were thinking library, police station, a whole bunch of grandiose plans, which are a public purpose, which would have allowed access across the property. Now that they're thinking about subdividing the property and selling it, that access is now in question. So as we believe, and I believe that our conversations with the state will bear fruit, is that as long as the homestead, as long as the property inside the open space is used as a public purpose, access will be allowed across it. Now, the question we have is, what is the width of the access and what does the access look like? But from the discussions that we had with members of the county when we were investigating this as part of the Public Purpose Study Committee, we were pretty confident that access across the open space is allowed as long as it's public use. So if we were...
That's not what the county told the township committee, and maybe they've changed their...
Yeah, from the information that I've seen and the deed that I've read, that says, because without that, we're not going anywhere. And so we're here truly believing that we have access across the open space for the homestead area as long as it's for a public purpose. That means a nonprofit group that is being stewards of the open space, is allowing a public purpose, not a commercial entity, but a non-for-profit group. So that's the big question that keeps us here at the table working towards this goal.
And the reason for the Green Acres, just so everyone understands that, the problem with Green Acres is once you buy anything with Green Acres, every piece of open space in a given community then is given to Green Acres. And they're very restrictive in terms of what they permit. And apparently the fact that they didn't subdivide the two parcels, even though it was intentional, and specifically they had certain dollars going to both these, that's what's created the confusion, which I think they can work their way out of.
Yes.
I know in the past there had been talk about the library. Has that whole library concept, which I thought was fantastic, as a way of bringing together the borough and the township? I realize, I don't know if it's as a result of the fire that idea is not viable, or if it, for other reasons, it's not possible at this point.
Short answer is nobody has the appetite for that now. And that's because, first, to do that, it would require a large space, a space that is larger than what we have here in this homestead area. It would probably require the entire back area there. That's number one. And when we floated the idea a year and a half ago of that, a large community space, you were talking earlier about the community club, something like that. So a library is much bigger than that. The immediate neighbors adjacent to that area had a major issue with that. So the immediate neighbors had an issue with that. The second thing is, it would really only make sense, and the proposal many years ago, perhaps 10 years ago, of having a combined library of the Mendhams, Mendham Township, Mendham Borough. We have two lovely little association libraries. And for full disclosure, I'm a trustee of one of them. So each library loves its library, but in terms of could we have a better library, one that is perhaps funded as a public library rather than association? Yes, but it would require both towns to agree on that, to build that facility. This could be that place. But at the moment, there isn't the appetite for both Mendham Township and Mendham Borough to do that. So that's why, back to the short answer, no. Not at least at this time point, given the realities of the economic downturn from 2008.
Getting close to the end of our 1 hour. I'll ask again if anyone has any suggestions, qualifiers for the site.
So with that, Tommy, you want some final words?
Sure. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. We are really hoping that this is the beginning of a conversation about how to solve Pitney Farm and how it can work for our community. Please feel free to look at our website, which is pitneyfarm.org. And we have a sign-in sheet tonight, so leave us your contact information so we can get in touch with you. And please feel free to reach out to any of us individually if something occurs to you later on or you want to continue this conversation that way. And we'd also like, if there were organizations in town that would like us to bring this presentation to you, we would be happy to arrange that. So please be in touch. And then I'd really like to thank all of you for spending the time and listening to us and offering your input. And we're very thankful to Mendham TV for filming this tonight, and they'll be broadcasting it on their channel periodically. So everyone, thank you so much, and thank you for coming this evening.